with multiple shocks in the pandemic by typical growth, inflation dynamics, and fiscal support to mitigate the shocks. Again, from the report, the recent financial turmoil aggravated an already uncertain and complex outlook with tight financing conditions and mounting concerns for debt vulnerabilities.
In the Fiscal Monitor report, the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the turbulence recorded in the banking system in the US and Switzerland point to a volatile environment in the market. It says fiscal policy should prioritize consistency with monetary policy to restore price and financial stability while supporting the most vulnerable. Abrupt changes in fiscal conditions also call for fiscal restraints to tackle fiscal vulnerabilities. The report urged governments to give greater priority to rebuilding fiscal buffers by developing credible risk-based fiscal frameworks that promote consistent macroeconomic policies, reduce debt vulnerabilities over time, and build up the necessary room to handle future shocks.
Also talking about cases like Nigeria or Ghana, where you have a large dependence on commodity prices and you can have effects of very large increases in oil prices, for example. So what happens in oil exporters is that when you have very large movements in oil price, this can lead to destabilization in the macro and the domestic economy. For example, if you have a large revenue windfall, like we have seen in the last years, this can lead to inflationary pressures in these countries. Fiscal policy can play a major role here. So if you have a counter-cyclical fiscal policy, that is, if the government save part of these windfalls, that's going to reduce the inflation pressures, and it's going to be so that you can react when the oil prices fall, and so you make the economy more stable.
With regards to inflation, the IMF estimates the effect of fiscal policy in inflation shows that targeted fiscal policy can support monetary policy in lowering inflation while protecting those most affected by the cost of living crisis.
Let's stay in Washington and look at finances. Now, risk of financial turmoil has increased rapidly in the last 6 months because of higher interest rates. World leaders are to discuss the threat of a new banking crisis in Washington after the International Monetary Fund, IMF, warned that financial instability risks triggering a global recession. Edward Nyako is at the IMF headquarters in Washington and has sent this report.
In its latest financial stability report indicates that stability risk across the global market had increased significantly in the last 6 months since it issued a report on global stability. And according to the bank, the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank in the US as well as Signature Bank and the takeover of UBS of Credit Suisse by the Swiss government is an indication that there is a need for policymakers to combine monetary tools with fiscal tools, and that will ensure a balance, but at the same time see to it that the poor and the vulnerable in the society are not affected by high inflationary pressures which is being witnessed across the world.
We do have a number of countries that are facing challenges in terms of debt service. Southern African countries have seen their borrowing costs rise, and there have been attempts to restructure, the debt in a number of countries. We're working very hard together with our membership to get to a speedy debt restructuring. I think it's absolutely key to get countries back on track in terms of macroeconomic stability.
The IMF pointed out that at the moment there is enough capital and liquidity in the global financial market compared with what transpired in 2008. The IMF also talked about the nexus between cryptocurrency and the financial market.
The crypto universe is fairly distinct at this point from the broader financial sector. Linkages, but they remain fairly small. And both the rise in valuations and the bust in valuations, and now of course valuations have been increasing again. Those have not directly been fueling valuations in the traditional financial sector.
For GBC News, Edward Nyakun reporting from Washington, D.C.
From Washington, research has revealed that 93% of countries, including Ghana, at the forefront of climate disasters, are drowning in debt. The newly published policy brief, The Vicious Cycle, the links between debt crisis and climate crisis by Action Aid International, a humanitarian organization, recommended for most climate vulnerable countries to have their debts cancelled, along with a radical reform of the way global debt is managed to stop further crisis.
Countries forced to pay back their debts to the World Bank, International Monetary Fund and private banks before spending on anything else. The research, The Vicious Cycle, the links between debt crisis and climate crisis, raises worrying questions about how the countries can rebuild, adapt and mitigate intensifying climate disasters. Also, 9 countries most vulnerable to climate change, including Somalia, Malawi and Mozambique, were already in debt distress during the research. The investigation found that 40 climate vulnerable countries were at moderate or high risk of debt distress, while only 4 countries being impacted by climate disasters were at low risk of debt distress. The Action Aid research comes on the back of the IMF and World Bank 2023 spring meetings, where economic policy options for global south countries are under the spotlight. Ghana, for instance, defaulted on its $28.4 billion external debt in December, with about 42% of that being domestic debt, leading the country to restructure its debt through a domestic debt swap. In January, Ghana applied for debt relief through the G20 Common Framework, widely criticized by some global economic watchers for very slow progress. Ghana is waiting for an executive board approval for a 3-year extended credit facility agreement for $3 billion with the IMF. The country director of Action Aid Ghana, Mr. John Inko, said Ghana was having to spend more on servicing its debts than it spent on education and health, saying it's a vicious cycle because cutting public expenditure means the country doesn't have many resources to spend on climate disasters when they do hit.
Let's do some health now. Now, Ghana is the first country to approve a new malaria vaccine that's been described as a world changer by scientists who developed it. The vaccine, called R21, appears to be hugely effective, in stark contrast to previous ventures in the same field. Ghana's drug regulators have assessed the final trial data on the vaccine safety and effectiveness, which is not yet public, and have decided to use it. The World Health Organization is also considering approving the vaccine. Now, malaria kills about 620,000 people each year, most of them young children. It has been a massive century-long scientific undertaking to develop a vaccine that protects the body from the malaria parasite. Trial data from preliminary studies in Burkina Faso show the R21 vaccine was up to 80% effective when given as 3 initial doses and a booster a year later. But widespread use of the vaccine hinges on the results of the larger trial involving nearly 5,000 children. Now, these had been expected to take place at the end of last year, but have still not been formally published. Ghana's Food and Drugs Authority, which has seen the data, has approved the vaccines used in children aged between 5 months to 3 years old. Other African countries are also studying the data, as is the World Health Organization, WHO. Now, there'll be more on that big story during our headline segment. You want to stay for that. But let's move on to the Central Region. The Center for Coastal Management of the University of Cape Coast, UCC, has launched its 10th anniversary celebration called for progressive reduction in subsidies for fishing inputs. It observed that too many subsidies on inputs such as premixed fuel was inimical to the fishing subsector and would further impoverish fishers and lead to over-exploitation of Ghana's fish stock if not reviewed. Now, Professor Dennis Walanyo Aheto, the director of the center, thus suggested a retrenchment to enable government to reinvest in other coastal development activities to improve the living conditions of the larger community.
Anniversary is on the theme celebrating a decade of impactful research and capacity building towards sustainable and resilience of Africa's coastal and marine environment. The Center for Coastal Management, CCM, which is a World Bank Africa Center of Excellence in Coastal Resilience, was originally conceived in 1997 and eventually established in 2013 with a mandate to conduct research, build capacity and perform extension activities. The vision of the center, among others, is to reduce coastal degradation and exploitation of marine resources and help protect the lives and livelihoods of coastal communities. In the view of this, the anniversary will reflect on the achievements and challenges of the center over the years and chart a path for progress for the next decade. Activities lined up for the celebration included webinars, observation of World Oceans Day, community outreach, workshops, health screening and health walk, Blue Economy Conference and the launch of the Ocean Institute. The director of the Center for Coastal Management, Professor Aheto, said there was the need to undertake comprehensive planning through objective stakeholder engagements to deal with the issue of subsidies devoid of partisan politics. He further called on stakeholders in the fishing industry, especially artisanal fishermen, to embrace the closed season, a scientific management measure to allow the fish stock to breed. He maintained the right time for the season was August. For the best results, it should be extended from July to September. Stakeholders and fishers, however, think it should be earlier. A question making the rounds is, what will fishers be doing when the period is extended? Even in a month, they are crying.
Let's look at safety now. The Central Regional Command of the Ghana National Fire Service, GNFS, says it has recorded an increase in fire outbreaks in the first quarter from 198 in 2022 to 225 in 2023, representing an 18% increase. The surge was likely due to bushfires, which have gone up from 68 to 98.
Regional Public Relations Officer of the National Fire Service, Assistant Division Officer ADO3, Abdul Wasiu Hudu, made it public that other fires, including domestic ones, rose from 50 to 69. Industrial fires moved up slightly from 5 to 7. Vehicular fires went up from 18 to 23. Electrical fires from 13 to 15. And industrial fires also pushed up from 5 to 8. About 71 of the total fires were minor ones that were put out before the arrival of fire personnel. ADO3 Abdul Wasiu Hudu attributed the rampant fire outbreaks to delay in rainfall over the period and other human activities such as farming, hunting, charcoal production, and of refuse, among others. He also blamed the situation on faulty electrical gadgets and negligence. He explained that people engage in multiple chores when they are at home. Someone could be ironing and cooking at the same time, and when that happens, more attention is given to only one.
Now, the National Communication Authority says it is working with the telcos to create a short code for individual subscribers to verify the number of SIMs associated with a Ghana card.
By the end of April 2023, when the short code is operational, there will be no need for subscribers to physically go to the telco to verify name. In a Facebook post, the NCA explained that by inputting the short code on your phone and after a verification process using your Ghana card PIN, the number of SIMs associated with the Ghana card will be displayed. Numbers linked to People's Ghana cards have been on the increase recently, with many calling for a common and simple system that will allow them to verify the numbers linked to their cards. Concerns are that fraudulent SIM registration is going on, where some telcos are using the Ghana cards of innocent people to register SIM cards for strangers, possibly fraudsters, without the consent of the card owner, which defeats the Vice President Dr. Baumier's quest to rid the country's cyberspace of fraud, monitor and track down persons who use their phones for criminal activities.
Let's look at agriculture. Once again, Ghanaians are being encouraged to eat the locally produced rice for improved nutrition. The parboiled rice, in particular, is said to contain gelatin, which consists of protein rather than starch. Now, the Monitoring and Evaluation Officer of Agriculture in the Northern Region, Mr. Dauda Abdul Salam, affirmed this when officials of Japan's embassy visited the Ministry of Agriculture and the Lulandi Rice Processing Center in Tamale.
The Lulandi Rice Processing Center in Tamale, being managed by Memunatu Al-Hassan for more than a decade, Lulandi has aggregated rice from smallholder farmers in the region for processing and retail. The center is also noted for the processing of high-quality parboiled rice. In parboiled rice preparations, the clean paddy rice is first soaked in cold water for about 24 hours to give the rice a moisture content of 30 to 35%. After that, the soaked rice is partially boiled in the husk for about 20 minutes until it begins to split open. The rice is then dried in the sun, cooled and milled. The final step involves hand-picking the broken and bad grains. The assorted rice is then packaged into bags for public consumption. The Lulandi Rice Processing Center is a beneficiary under the Sustainable Development of Rain-Fed Lowland Rice Productions Project Phase 2 within a bilateral technical cooperation implemented by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and JICA from 2016 to 2021 to boost rice production in the country. The overall objective of this project is to increase domestic rice production in the Ashanti and the northern regions. Mr. Dauda Abdul Salam is the Monitoring and Evaluation Officer at the Department of Agriculture in the northern region and works closely with the beneficiaries.
We have moved from 11 districts to 23 districts and end up with even 43 within a period. So we end up with 43 districts.
According to Mr. Dauda Abdul Salam, the processing steps for parboiled rice boosts its nutritional profile and makes it more resistant to weevils.
Parboiled rice is the best rice you need to consume. Why? One, it is the rice which have all the nutrient requirements. Rice have the nutrient within the husk, the one that cover the rice. The nutrients are concentrated there. During the processing of the parboiling, the nutrients move to the grain that I and you and I eat. So that makes it to be more richer than the straight meal that we all cherish because it's white. They remove all the nutrients which are embedded in the chaff, leaving only the white, which is the best.
On a field visit by the Japan Embassy team to the funded project site, led by the head of Economic and Development Cooperation from the embassy in Ghana, Mr. Sonoda Shohai, it was observed that the initiative has made great impact, especially in the lives of small rice holder farmers. Reporting for GBC News, Gifty Ajay, Tamale, Northern Region.
Away from the northern region, let's do education. Residents of Agona Safo in the central region are heaving a sigh of relief following the inauguration of the renovated Asafo Ida B Basic School and provision of learning materials. This gesture from My Help Your Help Foundation is an expression of the intention to provide quality education for all.
The school, since its inception in 1986, has not seen any renovation to ensure pupils live in a conducive environment. Apart from this, it also lacked teaching and learning materials, a situation that militates against effective learning outcomes. My Help, Your Help Foundation, a non-governmental that seeks to alleviate the plight of the poor, the needy and the less privileged in society through nurturing, education, training and development, stepped in to help rewrite the narrative. As part of its yearly activities, the foundation has renovated a project at Asafo AEDAB Basic School at Agona Asafo. The president of the foundation, Mr. Nicholas Kofi, said the project is geared towards fulfilling part of the foundation's core mandate of assisting in education by providing an enabling environment for learning in deprived communities.
The project also seeks to support Ghana's developmental goal of providing quality education for all, which by extension falls in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, SDG Goal number 4, which focuses on quality education, thus ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all.
The headmaster of the school, Mr. Justice Nimson, was grateful to the foundation for making good its promise. He said the gesture has come at an opportune time.
We, the teachers and the people, promise to make good use of whatever have been provided and also maintain them when the needs come. I cannot end my speech without thanking everyone that has spent his money, his strength, his time to make this project a success. If there's a God who blesses, that is the one that we call to bless you.
According to the foundation, the project also seeks to support Ghana's developmental goal of providing quality education for all.
Let's take you to the international front now. Chad's ambassador to Germany, Jan Christian Gordon Crick, has been expelled in a retaliatory move by Berlin after the Central African nation kicked out the European nation's ambassador last week. Germany's foreign ministry on Tuesday said Chad's Mariam Ali Musa has to leave the country within 48 hours. Time for us to take the weather update today, Thursday. Let's see how the weather will fare. Felicity Hafsianyo joins us on the phone lines now. Good morning, Felicity.
Good morning, Mositi.
Yesterday it started cloudy. We thought we'd see some showers, but it didn't happen. How is the weather looking like today?
Yeah, today we are expecting it to be a bit stable across the 16 region.
Right.
Let's get through to the afternoon. We are expecting mixed conditions this morning over just some few areas, Takwa, Sefibrekwai, those of us around Sunyani, Gosu, and Wenchi area. By mid-morning, we expect it to clear to partly cloudy sky, taking temperatures as high as 39-41 for the northern sector, for the middle sector between 32 and 35. For the coastal strip, we expect it between 31 and 33 Celsius. This afternoon, we expect thunderstorms with rain to affect most areas in the Oti region, Volta region, Eastern region, part of Ashanti, and then part of the Savannah area. We are having 40% chance of that for them. The state of the sea today will also remain rough. We are having some thunder clouds over the sea. It's not bulky. They can still work with it, but they just have to be a bit cautious on the sea. For the Volta Lake, it's cool this morning till the afternoon, around 3 to 4 p.m. thereabouts, when the clouds will start maturing to result into rain and then thunder town, so we expect them to be cautious around this time, so that if the winds are picking in terms of wind speed, they just have to take them back and go home, and then resume later in the night or tomorrow morning.
Thank you so much, Felicity Afianyo, for those updates. I'm sure our listeners will take a cue. That's it for GTV Breakfast News. There's more news when you log on to gbcghanaonline.com. Up next, our chef has something up his sleeve, and you'd want to stay for that. Also, for the headline segment, the Rev and the Sheikh will be in the studio. I am Altiti Saida Sadiq. I'll be back at 7 with sport.